do it to your mind. I can do it to your face. I can do it with integrity. I can do it with disgrace. But either way, I wanna kill you. I wanna blow you away. Johnny, 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 this is just wrong.
Oh, he's back. The GOAT is back. Oh, I can't call Johnny Bones the greatest of all time. Shh. Sunday, January 15th, the year is 2023, episode 380 of the Anik and Florian podcast. Cody, stop me now if we don't have clearance for Poe's Angry Johnny. Ken Flo remembers well when he walked out to that. John Jones is back, folks. Johnny Bones Jones is back. Good morning, Kenny.
How you doing, man? It's just such a great walkout song. So good, so appropriate. Man, I love it. I love it. Not only myself, the whole mixed martial arts world has been waiting as to when Jon Jones is going to fight again. Obviously, he's been preparing for the heavyweight division for a long time, which I think has served him well. Obviously, not being away or being away from the octagon for so long, it may hurt him in a certain extent, but getting up to that heavyweight division, doing it properly, putting on the muscle, doing it, adjusting your body for that for years takes time. And I think he's ready, and I can't wait to see Jon Jones unleash hell in the heavyweight division.
All right, a lot to get into today in headlines. Of course, we will recap UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Imavov, some other MMA headlines as well. Don't forget now, full episodes of the Anik and Florian podcast can be accessed on the DraftKings YouTube channel. You can also access clips on our Anik and Florian podcast channel, as well as Bilal Muhammad and Jason Anik's Remember the Show. Full details on this partnership coming up later in our second episode this week. Above all else, I think the most important part of this partnership, we're going to do 2 shows a week now instead of 1. And that has not been the reality for this show over the last 8 years. We do have to hold the rest of the details until Thursday, though. Thank you for your patience as far as all of that is concerned. I am reading right from Brett Okamoto's article at ESPN.com. And if you don't know, in print journalism, it is lead spelled L-E-D-E. And this is a brilliant lead, right? Simple. Jon Jones, arguably the greatest fighter of all time, will fight Ciryl Gane for the heavyweight championship at UFC 285 on March 4th. That according to UFC president Dana White. He is arguably the greatest fighter of all time, wherever you stand on that, and he is back for the first time in a long time. That means Francis Ngannou has been released. He is no longer the undisputed UFC heavyweight championship. And Dana said that the UFC and Francis negotiated a new contract for the better part of 2 years, and the deal would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the company. Of course, remains to be seen how long it would take him to sort of realize that distinction. Right. But Dana White said the highest paid heavyweight in UFC history remains Brock Lesnar, who retired back in 2017. Here's the quote from Dana Ken Flo. I've told you guys this before. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. I think Francis is in a place right now where he doesn't want to take a lot of risk. He feels like he's in a good position where he could fight lesser opponents and make more money. We're going to let him do that, release him from his contract, and give up our right to match. Francis did not immediately respond to requests from ESPN for comments.
Wow. It's very surprising, or maybe not, based on the back and forth that's been going on between Ngannou, Dana, and the UFC. I'm very interested to see where exactly he's going to go. I'm sure he will have a lot of suitors. I know he's had a lot of people who have been interested in him. But I think this goes a little bit further than money or him wanting to face lesser challenge. And this is the problem, is when you go back and forth, whether it's you're talking about Major League Baseball or the NFL, and you get an owner or a coach or something that says something bad about you, or something that happens back doors, that, behind doors, that doesn't go well. You'll get certain fighters, certain professional athletes that are going to make decisions that go beyond just the monetary reward. So curious to see where he ends up, man.
So I'm not an executive, right? Israel Adesanya got a long-term deal. I don't really know how Francis Ngannou, in terms of his promotional value, relates to Israel Adesanya. In terms of the internal metrics, in terms of how he does on pay-per-view, I know Francis Ngannou to be a walking major motion picture, right? He's the baddest man on the planet, to be sure. His story is unbelievable. I thought he was going to be a superstar in a stratosphere that maybe few fighters had ever realized, maybe just a tier below Conor McGregor. And I think largely when you're that guy, you feel like you deserve at least $5 million to show. Now, I don't know what he's looking for or what exactly he's making or how it all works in terms of the exact numbers on the pay-per-view revenue, but certainly it's disappointing, right? I mean, as somebody who called a lot of his signature knockouts and wins, and just when you thought, I know he's 35 years of age. No, Ngannou maybe is older than that. Jon Jones is 35. But, you know, you still felt like you might have 3 or 4 title defenses, big fights for Francis Ngannou. So as much as we're going to sit here and talk about Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane, and as much as he might end up with you guys in the PFL, I mean, this is, isn't this disappointing that, you know, the combat sports leader and the consensus best heavyweight in the world are parting ways, or no? All right. Ngannou 36, by the way, September 5th, 1986. Kenny, what do you have for me on all that?
Yeah, so I'll say this. I think that certainly the UFC fans want to see him in there, right? I think that there are some interesting challenges for him. I think especially in the PFL. But yeah, I think a lot of people, when you get a champion in the UFC, it's rare that we ever see a champion just kind of give up the belt and go somewhere else. This is not a common thing. And I think the fact that he, how accurate it is and whether this was actually going to happen, I don't know. But I think the boxing fight or that was proposed between him and Tyson Fury is playing a part as well, because it could seemingly give him the opportunity to both do boxing and do mixed martial arts. And the UFC just isn't about that. They're not going to promote or co-promote with many people. Conor McGregor was the exception, and I know they had to jump through hoops and a bunch of stuff to get that fight with Floyd Mayweather going. So,
yeah.
I think that played a part of it. I think the back and forth between Dana, the UFC, and Francis and his management had something to do with it. And perhaps he feels like he can best, leverage something outside of the UFC. So I wish him the best. It would be awesome to see him in the PFL. It would be, unbelievable. We'll see where he ends up. He still is super talented, but he is coming off a pretty bad ACL surgery. Knee reconstruction can take a long time. I hope he's fully healed from that.
So Dana saying Ngannou feels like he's in a good position where he could fight lesser opponents and make more money. So Tyson Fury is not that, right? Tyson is the consensus hardest fight for Francis in either boxing or MMA, and it stands to reason it is the biggest payday by a significant margin, right? If he does get that boxing payday against Tyson Fury, and this is pure conjecture and maybe informed speculation, but, it might take him 2-3 UFC fights to realize that payday, right? So if he gets that singular fight, you can certainly defend the decision. But as a mixed martial arts fan, this is wildly disappointing that Francis Ngannou is stepping away. And Jon Jones, as Dana says, ready, willing, and able to fight any heavyweight, including Francis Ngannou. The notion that Jon Jones or Daniel Cormier, for that matter, right, wouldn't fight Francis Ngannou or would be intimidated by that setting. You just don't know those guys as competitors. So Jon Jones, I think, is disappointed in some part. Maybe not Ken Flo. Ciryl Gane's the fucking man. But would you argue that Jon Jones not getting a chance to fight Francis Ngannou or to fight the consensus greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, Stipe Miocic, maybe some disappointment there in terms of the aesthetics of the matchup. But would you agree that Jon Jones was willing to fight any goddamn man in the world at 265 pounds?
There's no question about it. These are the fights that he gets up for and where he truly can shine. What was particularly interesting about the fight against Francis Ngannou is you have this guy who is an absolute monster who is 100% capable of knocking out Jon Jones, and has the athleticism to match someone like Jon Jones. Ciryl Gane, absolutely phenomenal fighter, highly technical, has been active, has shown his toughness and his technique. I love that fight, but to me, he's very similar to Jon Jones and how they move and the different weapons that they have and the varied weapons and footwork that they have. So to me, I think that's an easier fight, not an easy fight, but a far easier fight stylistically for him than a Francis Ngannou.